What's up, my comic comrades? Get ready, because today we are talking about the rise and fall of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, I know what a lot of you are saying, Eris, the MCU hasn't fallen, the DCEU is what fell and is over. And this is true, the MCU has not been scrapped like the DCEU or the Snyderverse, but guess what? The Marvel Cinematic Universe has most certainly been on a downtick since Endgame wrapped up the 10-year Infinity Saga back in 2019. That's something that's been debated for years, but at this point, it's just undeniable. Since the start of Phase 4 in 2021, the MCU has been all over the place, and most certainly on a decline pretty much across the board. Revenue, fan reception, quality of filmmaking, a clear story direction, and we could go on and on. The problem has become so obvious that it's escalated to the top of the Disney Corporation, with CEO Bob Iger making several damning statements about the state of the MCU in recent months, including his most recent comments at an investors conference in San Francisco, where he admitted that Disney has quietly canceled a number of projects that they didn't feel were strong enough. And while he didn't say which, if any of those were MCU projects, based on other comments Iger has made about the MCU shifting its focus back to its stronger franchises, we can safely assume that a number of previously announced MCU projects have gotten the axe. For one example, Avengers: The Kang Dynasty will at best be getting a new title, if not being scrapped completely. So that's what we're going to dive into here, how the once seemingly unstoppable Marvel Studios went from a box office guarantee to its current crisis state in just a few short years. Also, if you're looking at me wondering where you can get one of these dope variant snapback hats, you can grab your own along with a bunch of other variant merch at our Variant Lab shop at variantcomics.com. It's a great way to rep the Variant Nation and support what we're doing here on the show. The link for that is in the description. Okay, so let's start this deep dive into the state of the MCU by establishing that the first 10 years of the MCU is what launched comic books and their characters to a level of pop culture awareness it had never seen before. Now, to be clear, the 1978 Christopher Reeve Superman movie, the 89 Michael Keaton Batman movie, along with the Fox X-Men movies and the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films were huge hits and pioneers of the genre. But when Iron Man came out in 2008, it was the start of a new golden age of comic book films. It was the introduction to a universe of complex characters that were interconnected across several films. This meant Robert Downey Iron Man could cross over with the Hulk, which he did in the very first MCU Hulk film when Edward Norton was still playing the Hulk. It also meant after the first Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, Iron Man 2, and Thor movie, they could assemble and give us the Avengers on the big screen for the first time, which they did in 2012, and it was one of the most epic things to witness. We're spoiled now, but back in 2012, seeing the Avengers assemble for the first time in Manhattan, facing off against Loki and the Chitauri, was mind-blowing. It still gives me chills when I rewatch it because I remember the feeling of seeing it for the first time. After the first Avengers film was such a huge success for Marvel Studios, seeing that the fandom was loving it, it set us down an incredible road for the next 10 years, leading to a true boss fight, if you will. All while giving us great films along the way like Captain America Winter Soldier, the first Guardians of the Galaxy, Age of Ultron, Ant-Man, Captain America Civil War, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, with others along the way, all leading to the incredible Infinity War and Endgame finale that wrapped up the first 10 years. When you look at it all on paper, it really is astounding. What the MCU accomplished for film and fiction in the first 10 years is just mind-blowing. They were undeniably ruling the box office in all of fiction for a decade, driving movie sales, comic sales, merchandise, just everything for the medium across the board. I'm not joking when I say generations will look back at the first 10 years of the MCU, starting in 2008 with Iron Man and ending with Endgame in 2019, even though technically Phase 3 ended with Spider-Man Far From Home, as an iconic era for comics and movies. The MCU dominated the box office for so long, the A-list actors would even comment saying, if it's not a superhero film, it's probably not going to make money. With the success of the MCU, that meant other studios would have their own superhero films as well, bringing us into the golden age of comic book films, with the MCU undeniably leading the charge. But as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. Or maybe it's the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Either way, that certainly seems to be where the MCU is for now. And while there is hope on the horizon with the current shakeups at Disney and Marvel Studios, let's take a look at how we got to where we are now. First and foremost, one of the major problems the MCU faced after Avengers Endgame was the fact that they lost the two pillars of the MCU. The two characters the entire universe was built on, Iron Man and Captain America, with their stories concluding in Avengers Endgame. Think about it, in the DC film world, that would be like getting rid of Batman and Superman. That is extremely detrimental. Now, you can't blame the MCU for this, as by that point, Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans had been playing the characters for a decade. But nonetheless, that meant the MCU had to find characters the audience loved as much as Iron Man and Captain America to keep building off their shoulders as the universe needed to continue forward. Now, I'm not saying there weren't any other characters in the MCU that were up for that task to bear that cross, so to speak. In my opinion, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man, given their popularity could have done that well. Black Panther would have been my number one pick, as he is literally the king of the most advanced civilization on the planet, extremely well-intentioned, fan-loved all around, and just a great character. The first Black Panther movie was great, and Chadwick Boseman's performance as Black Panther was phenomenal. The problem is the MCU and Kevin Feige weren't able to pass the torch to him, so to speak, as Chadwick Boseman unfortunately passed away. This forced the MCU to have to shift directions, both with the Black Panther sequel and with their plans going forward, as he was no doubt going to be an integral part. Rumor has it he was going to be the next leader of the Avengers, and that would have worked perfectly. So again, after Endgame, you lose the two characters your universe was built on, and the unfortunate passing of another one of your most popular characters. Also, Scarlett Johansson, aka Black Widow, one of their other core Avenger members, is also gone, and said she's only going to do one more film, which is a prequel to her story, so it's not even going to push her forward. So right out the gate, we didn't have Iron Man, Steve Rogers, Captain America, we don't have Black Panther, and Black Widow will make one more appearance in Phase 4, but it's a prequel that's phasing her out and setting up the new Black Widow, Yelena Belova. But even with all that, I still think the MCU could have stayed at a high, or at least higher than they are now, if they made different choices. To see what I'm talking about, we have to look at Phase 4, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying Phase 4 as a whole wasn't good, it just followed a slow decline. The first Phase 4 project after Avengers Endgame was WandaVision on Disney+, which released January 15th, 2021. Overall, it was a really solid series, giving us revelations of how Scarlet Witch and her brother Quicksilver got their powers, further rounding out their characters. Scarlet Witch is one of my favorite MCU characters, and I thought the series did a great job furthering her and Vision's story, as well as introducing new characters like Monica Rambeau and Agatha. Then in March of 2021, we got the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I liked, and it seemed like that was the general audience reaction, where people liked it, but they weren't overwhelmingly flipping out about it. The series served as a setup to Sam Wilson as the new Captain America, which is a tough pill to swallow in the sense that Chris Evans had such a good run as the OG Captain America, it was going to be really hard for someone else to fill those shoes. I think Anthony Mackie did a good job, and I'm curious to see where they take it when he gets his solo Captain America movie next year. Then we have Loki Season 1. I don't have a bad thing to say about the Loki series. Loki Season 1 and 2 are easily the best thing to come out of Phase 4 and 5 thus far. And that's just a fact. I'm not even going to say that's my personal opinion. That is a fact. If you disagree with that, you're sleeping. But moving through these a little quicker, because there's a lot in Phase 4, 18 entries spread across movies and TV to be exact. After Loki, we got the Black Widow prequel movie that came out in July 2021. I dig this movie. I know it was polarizing, but I liked it for the most part. My only real gripe is Taskmaster. I said it on record countless times, you can call that character Taskmaster, but it is not Taskmaster. They should have called the MCU version of Taskmaster Abomination. It's more of an abomination than the actual Abomination Hulk villain. Anyway, after this, we got What If Season 1, again, really solid, no complaints. Then in September, they released Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, another solid film. But after this, the 7th entry into Phase 4 is where I felt like we got the first big uh-oh moment, and that is with the Eternals film. To this day, Eternals is the second lowest ranked MCU film on Rotten Tomatoes with a 47% critic score, with the lowest being only 1 point behind it. Now, I'm not saying I agree with Rotten Tomatoes or that they're always right, but for our purposes, it's a good gauge to get the general vibe and consensus. The biggest thing wrong with the Eternals, at least for me, is you just didn't care about these characters, which is so shocking considering what made the MCU so successful in the first place is how much they made you care about their characters. But in the Eternals, everything just felt forced, rushed, and not there. This is also where they started doubling down on changing characters from the comics for a film. Don't get me wrong, the MCU is no stranger to changing a character from the books for their films, but it seemed like they did it extra for this movie. To be fair, not many people were familiar with the Eternals. In fact, unless you're a comic fan, you probably couldn't even name me 3 Eternals before this movie came out. But for better or worse, this did upset a certain chunk of the fandom. Either way, after the Eternals, we got the Hawkeye series, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Moon Knight. I dug Spider-Man No Way Home. I mean, the fact that it brought back Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield alone makes me giddy. They knew how to pull on our nostalgia strings, hence the movie being the 7th most successful film of all time, making $1.9 billion in theaters. So yeah, I think people enjoyed this film. But then we got Moon Knight, which was just serviceable. In hindsight, it was just okay. I did really enjoy Oscar Isaac's performance and do look forward to seeing him reprise the role, but as a whole, this season is nothing to rant and rave about. It also doesn't tie into the greater MCU all that much. It's very much its own thing. The first few Disney Plus releases they had, WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and certainly Loki, Feige did deal with the fallout of Endgame or continue to push these characters' story forward, setting up for new things within the universe, but not so much with Moon Knight. As for the Hawkeye series, it's still one of my favorite Disney Plus MCU series. It did a bunch to flesh out his character, and I love his interaction with Kate Bishop. To that point, I think it did a really good job of setting up Kate Bishop for the future. So in our opinion, Hawkeye is definitely one of the bright spots in the last few years. But before we move on, we want to talk about Marvel characters in a different way, the gaming way. Can I tell you, I love me some Avengers. I also love fun games, so I'm extra excited about Avengers Infinity Quest from today's sponsor, Stern Pinball. In this epic pinball game, players will transform into their favorite superheroes as they battle Thanos and his minions across the cosmos on his unrelenting quest for intergalactic omnipotent power. It's a race to hunt down and recover the 6 Infinity Gems before Thanos gets his hands on them. It's up to players to stop Thanos and the Black Order from succeeding. They make the storyline really cool with an interactive Doctor Strange spinning kinetic sling ring disc with dual direction velocity detection, aiding players on their journey to opening portals and starting Infinity Gem quests. The game has an Avengers Tower lock ramp and magnet hold that captures pinballs in midair as players unlock the Iron Man multi-ball. And I gotta say, the multi-ball on all these machines is really fun. It just adds to the chaos, but in a good way. And to help you max out the gameplay through Insider Connected, you could use the location map to find any connected Stern machine near you. You'll also be able to earn achievements and connect with other pinball fanatics across the world. It's free through their app, which can be downloaded for iOS or Android. Just visit sternpinball.com or use our link in the description below to get your game on. Okay, so another thing that really started to turn things in a negative direction for the MCU was a new reasoning for the choices they were making. For instance, Ms. Marvel is clearly a tween Disney Channel younger audience type show. That was the target audience, which is awesome for that audience, but your main audience is not that. And before certain people start getting all huffy and puffy, I'm not saying the MCU shouldn't try new things. One of their strengths for the first 10 years was trying a lot of new things, like Ant-Man being a heist film, Guardians of the Galaxy being a space adventure, and so on. But at a time where you really have to be locking in your core audience and showing them, hey, look at this cool thing that's coming. We got dopeness ahead. You need to be selecting more fan favorite characters and do shows that appeal to your main demographic. But instead, a little bit after Ms. Marvel, they gave us She-Hulk Attorney at Law. This is quite possibly the most hated thing in all of Phase 4 or even just post-Endgame in general. So the type of shows and character selections they were giving us wasn't the best. Again, at a time where you lost some of your best characters and needed to give us some bangers to keep us excited, this didn't feel like the best route. I know a Blade film with Mahershala Ali is coming, rumors of Ghost Rider and the Midnight Suns and so on, but they should have led with that. You give us those fan-loved characters you've yet to introduce in the MCU up front and give us a new direction to keep the fan base excited. And then sprinkle in those lesser known or loved characters to try new things and build out the universe more. We would have much rather had the X-Men up front instead of now just finally getting them teased. Now I know Deadpool and Wolverine is probably going to do a fantastic job setting them up, but you're telling me it wouldn't have made more sense right after Endgame to jump right onto the X-Men? That would have kept the MCU at a high because everyone freaking loves the X-Men. That's a big reason why we're so excited for Deadpool and Wolverine. But instead, you gave us Ms. Marvel and turned her into a mutant by the end of the series, even playing the X-Men theme briefly in the season finale to force us to care about her as she's now a mutant tied to the X-Men. The only reason why they changed her into a mutant in the show is so she could be an X-Men and we would care about her more. And then of course, Marvel Comics had to follow suit and also make her a mutant in the comics because Marvel Publishing often wants to reflect the films to keep everything in unison. But also the Inhumans, both in the comics and the MCU, remember that god-awful TV show? Yeah, me either. Wasn't received well. They tried to make the Inhumans the new X-Men because the MCU didn't have the rights to the X-Men films at the time, but fans were like, yeah, that's not happening. So the fact that we got characters like Ms. Marvel, She-Hulk, even Moon Knight, who I love as a character, and then Werewolf by Night before the X-Men and Fantastic Four is mind-boggling. And I don't want to hear they didn't have the rights. No, that is bullcrap. Disney acquired the rights to the X-Men and Fantastic Four in 2019 when they bought Fox. Phase 4 didn't start till 2021, so if they would have put some hustle in it, we could have gotten the X-Men and Fantastic Four like 3 years ago. Then in between, Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, She-Hulk, and the new characters that were introduced, they still were doing legacy characters, so to speak, from the first 10 years. For example, right after Moon Knight, we got Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which was plagued with horrible CGI and a not great story overall. They straight up missed the mark on that, which is unfortunate because I love Doctor Strange and Benedict Cumberbatch in the role. And then it pains me to say it, but after Ms. Marvel, we got Thor: Love and Thunder. This is the worst entry in the entirety of the MCU, in my personal opinion. Because they took Thor, one of the most beloved characters of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, one of the founding members of the Avengers, and ruined him. They literally made him the punchline of every joke and a complete imbecile. So much so Hemsworth has gone on the record basically saying that if they do a Thor 5, the tone would have to be very different. I mean, for God's sake, Thor was in a love triangle with Mjolnir and Stormbreaker. And don't even get me started on Gore the God Butcher. Much like I said earlier about Taskmaster, you can call that Gore the God Butcher, but that's not Gore the God Butcher. No butchering was had. So even with their legacy characters, so to speak, from the first 10 years, they were still missing the mark, and I think a lot of that had to do with letting their directors and creatives have too much free reign. Especially when a lot of these directors and creators admittedly weren't fans of the characters and just took the job for the money. Taika was literally on Jason Bateman's podcast saying he took the job because he needed money for his family and he thought Thor was always a goofy character. So it's like, what did you expect? And I want to be clear here, we're not blaming the filmmakers. This is clearly on Marvel Studios as they're the ones hiring these people. You can't hand films over to people who know nothing about the characters or care about them and expect these films to come out good. You might get lucky every once in a while. It has happened, but it's a big gamble. The only reason why you're making these films is because of how loved the stories are in the books. So wouldn't you want to get people who love and respect the source material? In any case, this brings us to Phase 5, which is not complete yet. Phase 4 started with WandaVision and ended with the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, which was a ton of fun. Nothing bad to say about it. But there was a lot of stuff in the middle of these that was not the best. Phase 5 kicked off at the beginning of last year in February with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Yet again, another character from the first 10 years many of us love, but for whatever reason, this film was just not it. Also, out of all the films you could have made Kang the main antagonist for, you decided to make him the main villain in an Ant-Man movie? That just seems like an odd choice from the beginning. But yeah, this film was not good. The only redeeming qualities of the film, in my opinion, is Kang. And let's speak about Kang for a minute because this is another important part of why I feel the MCU started going downhill. For the first 10 years, we knew everything was leading to Thanos. Marvel Studios masterfully teased his impending arrival throughout several of their films, ultimately leading to Infinity War and Endgame. Kang, not so much. He was introduced in the finale of Loki Season 1 and then didn't reappear until Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which is crazy because this was still very early on in Phase 4. So we were all like, yeah, that's our next big bad for the MCU. But then nothing. There was legitimately 15 entries into the MCU across TV and movies after his introduction that did nothing to further Kang's arrival and tease how big of a threat he will ultimately be. It's almost like they weren't sure that's the route they wanted to go, so they needed some time to make sure that's what they wanted to do. I love Kang, he's a great character, big fan of him in the comics, so I was happy to see him in live action, but again, they should have introduced the Fantastic Four around 2021, 2022 and told us the big bad was going to be someone like Galactus. I mean, the dude literally eats planets. That's a serious threat, while simultaneously introducing Doctor Doom, which would also lead into something like Secret Wars. We are rumored to be getting a Secret Wars film with Doctor Doom now, but that's only seemingly because they had to ditch Kang because of everything that came out in real life with Jonathan Majors. Either way, the point is the lack of a clear direction with the big bad hurt the anticipation for the MCU, as there wasn't really something for fans to look forward to or to follow and try to link together. Also, the way they were building Kang seemed more on the actual actor than the character, which I thought was really weird. There was so much emphasis on Jonathan Majors as Kang and not necessarily the threat that Kang is as a character. So I feel like that didn't help them out either. Anyway, let's continue. After Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, we got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which was good. Super solid film, but it was the end of an era, essentially wrapping up this version of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And then we have the most current Phase 5 movie at the time of making this video, The Marvels. It's the MCU's biggest flop, the worst box office performance out of any film they ever released. Because yet again, the majority of fans were just not intrigued with Captain Marvel and Miss Marvel. Now, you could say superhero fatigue was setting in, which I do believe is a thing, but at the same time, the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which was released a few months earlier, made over 800 million worldwide. So it's not that people aren't willing to spend money on superhero movies, it's just they're only going to spend money now on superhero movies that look good or characters they want to see. The age of fans just seeing any Marvel or DC movie is gone. That time has passed. You have to earn moviegoers money now. But even MCU TV has been on the decline. Like Secret Invasion, for the most part, fans really did not like it, and that's because it wasn't great. They ruined the Super Skrulls and just Skrulls in general. I feel like the MCU doesn't know what they want to do with the Skrulls. Are they good guys? Are they bad guys? Are they misunderstood? They don't know. Then we got Loki Season 2, which was phenomenal, one of the best things the MCU has ever done. This felt like something that would have come out during the first 10 years of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't have a bad thing to say about it. It was phenomenal, so I'll give them that. What If Season 2 was also good, but then they gave us Echo, which was not the best. It was just another show that was like, why did we get this instead of, I don't know, something on Nova, another character we've all been waiting to see. However, to end on a brighter note, we have X-Men 97 currently airing weekly on Disney+, and the first 2 episodes were pretty amazing. We had our fingers crossed for this one like many of you, but so far it's a ton of fun and a solid continuation to the original series. We also have Agatha Darkhold Diaries coming later this year, which may or may not put the MCU in another precarious spot. But that's pretty much where we are right now for the MCU as we wait for Deadpool and Wolverine, which looks tremendous, so hopefully this could be where the MCU starts to tick back up again. To sum things up, what we're saying is the MCU hasn't completely fallen, but it has certainly fallen off from where it's been. There is no denying that the MCU has been struggling for the last few years, certainly the last 2. Revenue and box office is showing that, so the next 2 years is going to be very crucial to see if the MCU will eventually go the way of the DCEU. But as I said in the open, one of the most telling things about the seriousness of Marvel's current state is the fact that Bob Iger has taken a much more intense position on the future of the MCU, stating quantity hurt quality, and they followed that by reducing Marvel Studios' 2024 movie slate to just 1 film. And Iger has since canceled projects they, quote, no longer believe in. Again, there's been a ton of speculation about which MCU project has gotten the axe. I'm looking at you, Eternals, too. But no matter what, the fact that they're making these drastic moves says it all. So this is why it's extremely important that Deadpool and Wolverine succeed at course correcting. Because if it's not good, a lot of people are going to check out, and it's going to be extremely difficult for the MCU to garner attention and regain momentum. I honestly believe if Deadpool and Wolverine fails, we are looking at the permanent downfall of the MCU. However, it most likely is going to be good, so I don't think that's going to happen. When Bob Iger last year said Disney as a company, which means Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, and so on, has to focus on storytelling and not messaging, he was admitting in CEO language that they made a mess. He's aware it's an issue and that things need to change. So again, hopefully the massive shakeups underway leads to a solid course correction for a franchise many of us love. I know we certainly do not want it to fail. But what do you guys think? Do you think the MCU can redeem itself with some of its upcoming projects? What's been your take on Phase 4 and Phase 5 so far? Let us know down in the comments. Other than that, we'll see you next time when we talk about all things comics.